In this lesson, we'll review what we learned in this course. So starting out initially, we talked about an overview of Revit structure, specifically version 2015. We talked about the interface, the shortcut keys, how to use the working files, templates, projects, how to set up system families and in-place families. We then talked about basic creation tools, how to use and view the model in 2D, 3D. We talked in depth about the structural tabs for structure, foundation, reinforcement. And then we talked about the basic editing tools, like selecting and filtering, moving and copying, creating arrays, extending, trimming, and we talked about groups and best practices with groups. From there, we went on to create structural projects. We started with a standalone project, and then we linked in multiple Revit projects or models to our Revit model. We talked about monitoring changes between these models, and we talked about review messages, information, if you will, if something is out of date or updates are out of sync. We then talked about work sharing in a collaborative environment where multiple people would sync to a central server. We then looked at linking in additional CAD files, meaning 2D files. We looked at different approaches to do this. Then we moved on to views and everything about views, section views, elevations, understanding the view plan range, looking at view templates, and then different ways to crop our views through scope boxes and section boxes. And then we moved into building things when we started with levels and grids and setting up those levels and grids. And then we built columns and walls on our levels and grids. We talked about the different placement techniques of structural columns and structural walls. Then we also added foundations, footings. We looked at creating different custom families for footings. Then we also added piers, slabs, and slab edges. From there, we moved into structural reinforcement, such as rebar and different rebar types. We talked about reinforcing walls, floors, and slabs, using area reinforcement and path reinforcements. Then we moved into beam and framing, where we created beams. We attached beams to frames. We looked at their intersection and their joins. We added bracing, trusses, and we created groups. Then we created floors on top of our beams. We created a floor system, and we cut shaft openings within our floor systems. Then, after we had everything built within our model, we started to document. We started with scheduling for our structure, for our columns. And then we went into detailing and annotation details of the finer parts of our structural model. We looked at importing details, creating legends, and detailing in 3D. And then we put together the actual sheet plan, the documentation, creating sheets, title blocks, dropping our views on our sheets, editing our views, adding revisions, dimensions, tags and text, and finally printing those sheets. Then we once again talked about work sharing, that collaborative approach to having a central server and multiple people can work on that Revit project. And then lastly, we looked at presentation. We looked at real-world materials applying to our structural elements. We looked at creating images, exporting those images, and finally, creating a walkthrough so you can show your customer what your structural 3D model looks like as if they were in it. So I hope you enjoyed the course on Revit Structure 2015. Thanks.